Have you ever been interrupted by a hurricane during a podcast or while you're listening to one? Well, today I had the pleasure of interviewing Gabe Aluisy from Tampa, Florida, with Shake Creative and does a branding podcast and a private club radio show as well down there. And anyway, the interview took place okay, but we had Hurricane Gaston traveling just a little bit north of him, so we made it out safe. He did, rather. I'm far from that, so I didn't have to worry. But what we did want to talk about while the hurricane was blistering by was talking about branding and talking about how to make an impact with different personas, with different groups, and how you actually identify those in your basic branding, and how branding is really more about thinking about the five senses and what you do and making sure that you kind of correlate those through that. The future, it is millennials, I'm sorry to say, for those of you who think that it's not. So we take a look as well at what can be done, not to hamper them, but to help them as businesses grow into their customer base and that sort of thing. So Gabe Aluisy, he's the expert in the luxury niche market, and he talks to us about some amazing branding aspects in advertising.
Overwhelmed with online or just wanting to learn more about how you can build a successful business amidst all of the self-appointed gurus, big buzzwords and empty promises? The Breaking Digital podcast by Doyle Bueller tells you exactly what smart entrepreneurs need to know to escape the clutter, get clear of the confusion, and pass the bullshit of building and growing a successful business online. It's about digital leadership and delivering the best value for your business online to your audience. Now, here's your host and author of the book on digital leadership and online marketing, The Digital Delusion, Doyle Bueller.
All right, so welcome back. Welcome, Gabe. How are you today?
Hey Doyle, it's great to be with you. Yeah, so happy to be here.
And I heard you had to brave hurricanes and tropical storms and all that. Is that true?
The wind's actually blowing here. Yeah, the rain's coming down. There's been a couple tornadoes that have touched down. We have Hurricane Gaston coming through right now, but we're luckily just on the south side of it.
Oh wow. Well, that's okay. But you're safe and all that, right?
We are. We've battened down the hatches and opened a few adult beverages, so we're in good shape.
All right. So broadcasting live from Hurricane Gaston, is that the name?
Yeah.
Or the outskirts of broadcasting live from the outskirts of Gaston.
Right.
No, fantastic. So you've been doing some pretty amazing things, Gabe, in the podcast space, in the marketing space, in the advertising space. Can you give us a quick introduction of yourself?
Absolutely. Well, I am what I would consider a branding geek. So a couple years ago, I created a podcast called the Branding Podcast. It sort of went along with my book, which was called Moving Targets, Creating Engaging Brands in an On-Demand World. And the goal of that podcast and what I was doing was really to not only entertain entrepreneurs, but really give them a real good foundation when it came to branding and how to take their company from a startup to a brand that people would admire, not only admire, but really get behind and become brand champions for. So I've had a lot of fun doing that and continue to do the podcast from time to time as well.
Oh, that's good. And sort of that's led into sort of more direct marketing. Actually, one question I have, how do you actually entertain entrepreneurs?
Yeah, well, so much stuff is business in all business. So I try to bring some fun stories and some anecdotes in there, some stories of travels and things like that. And
yeah.
I think it helps.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, no, we're a hearty bunch and not always the most humorous.
Right. It's true.
No, just kidding. I tell jokes all the time, just nobody gets them.
There's that dry sense of humor from Canada there.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, cool. So you kind of moved into the, not moved in, but you've been there for a while, the branding and the marketing. And is that sort of your core strength now?
That would be my core strength. And I've really niched down in terms of, everybody has a cousin or a uncle or a roommate from college who was a graphic designer or a marketing guy. And so about 5 years ago, I really decided that I was going to pick one particular niche and really own it. And so for me, that was private clubs. I loved golf. My father was a PGA professional, and I learned golf when I was 3 years old. I really loved the world of private clubs. So that's golf clubs, yacht clubs, and business clubs.
Yeah.
And my aim has really been to own that market and become the marketing agency for private clubs.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
so what's been interesting is when I first started my company, I called it Shake Creative, which at the time rang very true for me. It was, shake things up, do something differently. And people got a kick out of that. But when I kind of shifted my focus to niche myself, I actually have to rebrand myself, I found out. So we're actually rebranding our own company. So I'm putting a lot of my advice into practice as we speak. And we're coming out as the private club agency here this fall.
Oh, fantastic. So it's an ongoing evolution then, I guess. Nothing sits still in branding.
It doesn't, and it shouldn't. If you're moving forward, or it's you either sitting still or you're moving forward, obviously. But it's been kind of interesting because I built a site that really ranks number one here in my local market. So if you were to search for graphic design or branding, where I'm from here in Tampa, Florida, my site would come up number one.
Oh, fantastic.
But what's interesting about that is I was really attracting opportunities that I didn't really want. So I have all these brand new startups and people that really didn't know what they wanted coming to me. So I know so many people, they want to have a number one website or they want to boost their SEO. And I guess my little cautionary tale is to really make sure that you are putting yourself and your brand in the right light and starting to attract the right opportunities for yourself, and make sure that the message is delivered to the right people that you actually want. So I actually learned a lesson there.
Well, that's a good one. Can you tell, this has sort of been on my mind for quite some time. Maybe you can help. In terms of branding, actually, let me ask you this first. I'm going to set you up, but what's your definition of branding?
Branding is really everything, is the short answer. But it's the feeling or emotion that is in the consumer's eye when they think of your company. That's how I would describe it. Of course, it has a lot to do with your look, but it's a lot more than your look as well. It really is what somebody thinks about when they hear your name or when they come across your logo or when they see the outside of your building.
Yeah. So what you're saying though is that your brand is not just your logo. Is that correct?
That is 100% correct. And I think people often mistake what branding is, and they think it's just design related or the look of the logo or the colors that you use or the fonts that you use. And that really is, in my opinion, comes last in the process. It's the internal stuff and the core values and the emotion that comes along with everything that you do.
And how do you build in that emotion though? That's a big ask for a lot of businesses and entrepreneurs. How do you build that emotion in?
So it's number one, who you go after and how you talk to them. And so it really comes down to communication. And when I say go after, it's actually both internal and external. So we not only want to attract the right customers for our products or services, we also want to attract the right team members or partners that we're going to play with. It's just as important to have the right people on the bus as it is to be attracting the right customers. So a lot of it comes down to communications, copywriting. It's the way you talk to people, the way you interact. And let me give you one story that sort of ties that in together. So I had a client here in North Florida who was a real estate company, and they were building new homes for younger families, but they were doing it in this historically like a retirement community. And they were building homes that would actually be for the people that are working in the retirement communities, but they were young families, mostly kind of young, educated families. And so they wanted us to come in and help them with their branding and their design and marketing. And I called them up a few times, and this older gentleman, he was about 80 years old, he answers the phone. And he was a really nice guy, but I always I would say to the owner, I was like, there's nothing we can do is if this is the guy that's going to be answering your phone. I mean, he's a really nice guy and all, but he's not what you want to portray as your brand. You're trying to attract younger families, but you're having this older gentleman actually speak to them. So it's speaking on their level and it's speaking the right language. That's really, really important.
Yeah. And so did they fire the old guy?
Yeah, they started using a younger lady. I mean, they didn't fire him. They just found another job for him to do. He wasn't the phone answering guy anymore after that one. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. What are some of the other struggles that entrepreneurs and businesses would face with branding?
Well, with branding, I think it's, again, finding the right target market or target audience. So a lot of people start a business and they're way too broad about who their target market is. When we have a discovery session, the first question I ask is, who is that perfect avatar is what we call it. That's the word, but who's your target person out there, that would be perfect for this product or for this service? And the answer I often get is, well, it could be men or women, anywhere from age 35 to 65. And so that's when I stop. I say, whoa. You have to really narrow this down. Is it men or is it women? Is it children or is it teenagers? Is it adults? And I really get them to narrow it down into like a 5-year period. So it's not men and women 35 to 65. It then becomes it's women 35 to 40. and the further you can drill down, the more you know your customer, then the more that you can start to really increase and become more efficient in your marketing. So it's really narrowing it down. And I think the biggest problem that entrepreneurs face in the beginning is that they just want to sell to everybody. And my advice is always to get rich in the niche.
Get rich in the niche. Love it. Oh, that's perfect. Can I quote you on that one?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Although I don't think I made it up. I heard it somewhere.
Oh, okay. All right. No, that's fine. No, it applies because that was one of the pardon me, topics that you see an awful lot on is this huge misconception of that basic principle of marketing. So why do you think that, I don't know what the percentage is. I hear that a lot too. It's like, oh, I want to sell to everybody kind of mentality. But why do we think that way?
Well, I think it really has fear is probably the underlying thing that, like, if I don't get my message out to everybody, I could be missing out, and that's really not the case. The more targeted, the more direct you can be, the more you'll actually attract people even outside that sphere. It's kind of interesting that it works backwards like that.
Yeah, it gives us something to think about, really, because when you think about it, it's not, and maybe that's the misconception, is that everybody feels that, yes, this is my product, it's brilliant, I got 5 stars on it from my mom, kind of thing. So everybody's going to want that.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
It's exactly opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yep.
No, for sure. Okay, what other struggles do you see with branding?
Well, I'll switch gears a little bit and talk about advertising, because I know your folks probably want to hear a little bit about digital advertising. And I think the second, biggest mistake that I see people do is that they try to sell very logical reasons. They sell for logical reasons instead of emotional reasons. And what you find out if you really study brands and you study products and markets is that people actually buy for emotional reasons. And the example I would give you is, think about the last car that you bought. Did you buy that car because it had more steel per square inch than its competitor? I mean, that would be a really logical reason to buy a car, right? I'm going to get more metal for my money. If we were cavemen, that would be what the criteria is for buying a car.
Well, some people like more horsepower, but yeah.
Yeah, you might want some more horsepower. But why do you want that more horsepower? Because you want to have more speed and you want to have a thrill, right? So the emotion is it's more thrilling experience.
And that's really why it's for the ladies.
That's another great one. Again, something that fills an emotional void. You might want a partner, right? Yeah. So we buy things, especially luxury purchases, but we really buy nine times out of 10, we're buying for emotional reasons. Yet all too often, I see companies trying to advertise for very logical things, and they're doing it in a very logical way. I always think of the bullet point list, right? The bullet point list is probably the most logical thing you can write if you're going to do some copywriting, if you're going to create an ad, right? We want to get all those features in. But that's not what really pushes the consumer's buttons. The consumer wants to connect with the brand, and they want your product or service to fill an emotional need. And so that is probably, one of the major things that you could do right now if you just made that little shift, that you could be a lot more successful.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. So, how do you relate that to the luxury niche though, which has sort of been your focus now?
So, like I said, I work with private clubs, golf clubs, right? And a golf club membership is anything but a logical decision. You're going to plunk down in the United States probably anywhere from $25,000 to $75,000, and you're most likely never going to get that back. It's not a very good investment, and that's just for the pleasure of showing up and probably paying your $1,000 a month in membership dues. So right off the bat, it's not a very logical purchase. But how do golf clubs actually market themselves? Well, they'll say, our golf course was designed by this architect, or we have 18 holes of golf. We have championship tennis courts with this particular playing surface. We have a banquet facility that can seat 250 people. Again, all these really logical reasons to buy a private club membership, but doesn't fill the emotional need that the consumer actually wants. So why do people actually buy a private club membership? They buy it because they want to feel a sense of camaraderie, or they want to have a community of people that are like-minded around them. Or maybe they want the safety and security of being able to bring their family to a country club where they know they're going to be safe behind a gate. Those are the emotional reasons that people actually buy a private club membership, and these clubs are oftentimes doing it wrong. And so I try to have them sort of shift that conversation in their digital advertising.
Cool. And so how do you find those triggers then?
Well, it's knowing your market. So again, the more you can really drill down and know who your niche is. An example of clubs around me, probably they are people with a certain net worth, maybe between $250,000 to $500,000. They have an interest in healthy living. And these are all things we find out from surveys or from data that we know about our existing members. It's always great to poll your existing customers and see what are those commonalities. And then you can actually figure out, okay, well, maybe this is the niche that I should be going after. Again, once you sort of know what that niche is and you know what they want, you can start to build products and services as well as advertise to them in a really specific way that you're going to be able to fill their needs and desires. So, we found out that a lot of people, especially right now, we know there's been some crazy things going on around the world with, these mass shootings and suicide bombings and all these things. And one of the biggest factors that people are considering when they're considering a private club is their safety and security. So I had a client here pretty close by who they thought that they have a gated community. They thought that was really a negative, that people felt like they'd be shut out. But I told them, no, that's actually something that you should be focusing on. Let's shift that conversation. It's a positive because people right now are really uncertain and unsure about what's going on in the world. So it's just narrowing down who your niche is, finding out a little bit about them, and then speaking their language.
No, that's good. And is there a specific methodology that you kind of use to speak their language? Especially if you're sort of an outsider as a marketer, as a branding specialist, how do you actually find that out? You did mention surveys, but do you do a lot of testing, groups, feedback? How do you get there?
Well, that actually leads to a pretty good point is what I see, another mistake that I often see entrepreneurs do is that they'll poll their friends, right? And their friends often aren't their target market. You see this on Facebook a lot. Like I know a lot of authors, for instance, and the authors will put their book covers up there and they'll say, well, they'll put it up to their friends and their family and say, well, what book cover do you think is going to work? Or, what is the best book cover? But the problem is the friends and family might not be that target audience for the book, right? So that opinion really isn't valid. So it's, yeah, first finding the right people that match what your target audience is. That's really the most important thing to do. We use surveys. It's also important if you can get some people on your team that, match that profile. So if I'm going after a younger demographic, I probably want to have some designers or some people that work for me that probably match that, so they can actually tell me what might work and what might not. Because what I think is one thing, and what reality is oftentimes totally different, totally
Yeah.
opposite. So you have to find someone who can advise you who actually fits that mold.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. And so that you've actually mentioned that before, though. What about millennials? What's up with them?
Oh yeah, I've actually been talking about millennials a lot. It's a real fear in the private club industry, especially because most private clubs are made up of people 55 and
Old,
up,
old
honestly.
guys.
Yeah. I mean, when you think of a golf club, you think of the old white guys, sipping cognac and playing cards
Yeah,
and having a good old time, or who knows where the wife and kids are. And that's really not, if you're going to, it's not sustainable in today's world, because first of all, women mostly are making the purchasing decisions, especially when it comes to those types of things. And you really have to engage the entire family. So millennials is a really important piece to these clubs surviving in the next 10 to 20 years. And so I'm doing all I can to sort of educate people. So there are a few things with millennials you gotta understand, is that, of course, number one, millennials are much more concerned with experiences over things. They value experiences, once in a lifetime experiences. You're more apt to see a millennial spend money on a vacation or something really, a fantastic trip, rather than a Rolex watch or a Ferrari, for instance. For me, I think that's a great thing for private clubs, because a private club, or playing a round of golf, or going to the spa at one of these clubs, that's an experience. And so it's really shifting the conversation again, not talking about, things, but really talking about experiences. That would be probably the first piece of advice. There's plenty of other things if you want to go down that rabbit hole, but it's up to you, Doyle.
yeah, no, no, that's okay. I just want, I honestly was making a joke of it, but obviously.
Oh no, it's true. It's
So,
for real.
yeah, well, no, that makes a good point, because if these types of clubs are going to survive, they obviously have to think of the generational thing, right? They've probably been around for 20, 30, 40 years already.
Hundreds of
Okay,
years, some of
hundreds
these
of
guys. Yeah.
years. There you go.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, that's good. So, what's the future then, besides millennials?
Private clubs, you mean?
Yeah, and branding and everything.
Yeah, well, I think it's engaging the entire family, in terms of a private club, at least. So, how do we find ways to get women involved, to get children involved, which historically, again, it had been an old boys club. So clubs, clubs at least are, adding more spa and fitness facilities, doing more casual dining, relaxing the dress code, getting rid of that stuffy atmosphere that once existed. In terms, for what your audience might be interested outside of the world of private clubs, you have to provide a lot of information about your product or service. You have to have that on your website somewhere, because nobody's making split decisions nowadays, especially when it comes to purchasing decisions. Nobody's just, deciding to buy something. They're doing a lot of research. I know that they're pretty savvy listeners of your show, but of course, having reviews and the right ratings and things online is really important for millennials, because they're going to want to be, making sure that they're doing their due diligence and getting to know your brand. I think to have a really clear and consistent message is important. Being concise, as you know, we live in an on-demand world. Everyone's running at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and so really, again, sort of paring down, all that logical stuff, and really breaking it down to its base elements, and communicating a message in as short of a amount of words or amount of visuals as possible is really important as well.
No, that's good advice. And so what's next for you then, Gabe?
What's next for me?
Yeah, in your
Well,
branding development.
yeah. Well, like I said, I'm right in the middle of a rebrand myself. So that's kind of pretty exciting because it's again kind of a way to see if I can practice what I preach. Um, so we're rolling out the private club agency. We're hoping to do that in the next month, and we're putting together all the new websites and all that stuff right now. So it's a pretty exciting time.
Oh, that's good. And
Yep.
so could you give us a good example of, brands that are doing it really, really well in your mind?
Yeah, there's plenty of brands doing it really well, and some do it well in different mediums. So if you haven't already, if any of your listeners want to really see a great social media brand in action, I would have you check out Taco Bell on Twitter. I think they do it right. They speak
Okay.
they speak the language of their customers. Like that's what I was saying in the beginning is like, it's communicating on someone's level is so important. And they really do that. They do that on Twitter really well. On the luxury side, I love what Rolex does. They really show their value. They talk more about value, and you're never going to see Rolex do a discount. When you discount something, you offer a coupon, then you're setting a lower standard, a lower bar every time. And so what Rolex does is actually the opposite. Every year, Rolex raises their price.
Nice.
So it's going to go up 2 or 3% every year. And I think that's really admirable in a world where everyone's trying to cut costs and compete. So I love what they're doing there. Mercedes, I love. I drive a couple of Mercedes myself, so I love the whole thing. They have a great tagline to me. It's called, I think they call it the best or nothing.
Nice.
So again, really speaks to what their particular demographic wants. They want something that is unlike any other, and that's, excellence.
Yeah.
So again, it doesn't matter what space you live in. You could be a lower tier brand, a mid tier brand, an upper tier brand, but if you can communicate consistently in a way that your target market connects with, that's the most important thing you can do.
No, for sure. And do you find that I kind of do this myself, but when I'm, as the branding expert, do you find that you look at all the different brands and the messages and how they're doing it almost on everything? Or is that just
Yeah.
me?
My favorite thing is to look at billboards. I don't know why. That's my, I get a kick out of seeing who's doing a good job with their billboards.
Yeah.
Everything is it's important, and it has to be consistent. Not only visually of course is important, but that's almost obvious. I think in this day and age, it's the message and the voice of the brand that needs to stay consistent. And just like that stupid little story I told you, you got to have the right person answering the phone. You need to have the people when they walk into your office, or catch the vibe that you're putting out in your branding. So if you have this really modern looking website and someone walks into your office and it looks like it's something out of the 1980s, you need to change that.
Yeah, I've been to a few of those.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
Yeah. There was actually this one, what was it? Like an advertising, well, I guess it was an advertising agency, so they kind of got a good excuse, but they had like a denim couch from like 1982. It was like, wow.
Oh my goodness. And I when you first asked me, what is branding? And I said, it's everything. One thing that I would definitely recommend people is to think about your five senses, right? How do you impact somebody in all five senses? When someone walks into your office or your store, what do they smell? Do they taste anything? Like, do you offer them just a plain bottle of water like every other person in the world? Or do you offer them a infused lemongrass drink or something that really goes along with your brand? Make sure that your business cards feel like your brand should feel. So if you have a sleek, modern brand, your cards feel sleek and modern. Or sometimes I'll see a company that wants to be trendy and modern. They're using like a linen business card, for instance, which is a very old
Classic
style of paper. Yeah, classic style of paper. And that would work great if you're an attorney or an accountant, but it doesn't work well if you're a marketing guy or a SEO firm or something like that. So really think about each and every one of those senses and make sure that everything is tying in its on brand message.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, the linen cards might come across as a bit pompous for like an SEO guy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, the five senses can be, we kind of don't really think about those things until somebody says, like, oh, what about this and what about that?
Yeah.
Are there any triggers that sort of help align people to say you should be thinking about this as opposed to just saying it?
Well, I don't know if I'm answering the question the way you're asking it, but a smell is an incredible trigger that
Yeah.
nobody thinks about that I know. Um, you know, to give you a couple examples, if you wanted to be if you wanted like a sense of relaxation, for your customer when they walked in your store, maybe you'd have lavender or something relaxing, vanilla or something like that. If you wanted it to be sort of more up tempo or more trendy or edgy, maybe you have a citrusy smell, something that kind of wakes people up. I think smell is a really powerful, and if you think about it, smell is something that is really incredibly tied to memory. It just happened to me the other day where I hugged somebody and they were wearing a particular perfume, and I remembered that's like a perfume that my great aunt used to wear, and she had passed away, but it reminded me of her, and that happens with everybody. It happens from time to time where, I think music is probably another really strong one where a particular song, you remember where you are when you first heard it.
Yeah.
But smell is incredibly powerful in terms of sensual perception. I think that's one trigger that people miss out on a lot. So, hey, just spray a little perfume in your office the next time you walk in. I think maybe you'd see some. I know it sounds crazy, but you have to get people in the right mood.
Yeah, so maybe that's a good branding exercise then. What kind of, if you were an alcohol, what kind of alcohol would you be? Or if you were a perfume,
Right.
what kind of perfume would you be?
Right. Exactly. Yep.
No, fantastic. So how do you translate though? Because obviously digital is my thing.
Yeah.
Smell, we don't have smell-o-vision yet, but is there other things that we can kind of do for the digital side that might be helpful?
Well, let's say you have a hot prospect and you send them an email or they're in your email funnel, and maybe part of your funnel is you send them something, a little package in the mail with something that smells. That would be something, wouldn't it, Doyle?
That would be, yeah.
Probably make a big difference. Obviously, in terms of digital, though, all joking aside, you have to make sure that your fonts are consistent, and that you're not using too wild of a structure. Meaning, I generally tell my clients, pick two fonts, three at the most. Make sure that you're using those consistently. You have a certain font that's your headline font, just like when you do a website. What are your sub headlines? What is your body text? And make sure that everything comes across visually that way. Make sure you pick a limited color palette. Again, maybe 3 colors, 4 colors that are your brand colors, and make sure that all of your pieces online have those colors in them. Visual, of course, is a very strong sense. They're all extremely strong, but in digital, obviously, we're probably only going to be able to affect visual, and then, of course, maybe auditory if we were getting into sound and things like
Yeah,
that.
well, you mentioned sound as a huge cue as well to bring that
It is.
emotional state. So,
Yeah.
but sound can be annoying too, right? Especially
Yeah, you
for a
probably don't want like
website, and
yeah,
that's
you probably don't want the auto play like you used to have,
mm,
5, 10 years ago.
yeah,
That doesn't really work, but the sound of your voice on your podcast is something consistent that could be something, right? But the intro music to your videos, for a lot of people are doing a lot of things with videos to have a particular intro music on those. Yeah, that's all
yeah,
important.
yeah. No, oh, that's really cool. No, well, that's good. Having a wonderful conversation here, Gabe. Is there anything else that kind of you felt was important for entrepreneurs or branding or niching as we say?
Yeah. Well, in terms of marketing, another hallmark advice that I often give my clients that I see a lot of people doing wrong, I would call it, is that they don't have one call to action. They have multiple calls to action. So if I look at a lot of ads online, I might see a phone number as well as an email as well as a web address, right? And what happens is that's confusing for people. You need to make it super simple, really dumb it down for the consumer, and just offer one call to action, one specific call to action. And, your folks are probably a lot more savvy than the folks that I'm dealing with in the world of private clubs. But what I'll tell them is, hey, don't bring someone to your homepage. Bring them to a specific landing page or to a page on your site that's specific to what you're advertising. So if you're advertising your food options in your dining room, make sure that they don't go to the homepage. Make sure that they go to the restaurant page on the club's website. Little things like that. Having one call to action, that's super important.
No, really good. And then you can actually sort of try to track that as well and see kind of what results you're getting too.
Oh, I love doing A/B testing. Where I bring them to one particular landing page and see how that does against another landing page with maybe slightly different colors or different communication style, different headline, that sort of thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Wow, some amazing advice, Gabe, and tips in branding. I really appreciate your time and getting to know you and talking to you from around the world as well. Just fantastic in light of a hurricane. So
Doyle, thanks for having me on the show. I'm really enjoying it, and it's been great to hear some of your other episodes. Definitely recommend listeners go back and check that back catalog.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thank you. So how do we find you in the digital space, because we are around the world? So yeah, how do we find you?
I will give you my personal website because in the midst of a rebranding, it might be weird to give you one of the other ones. So Aluisy.com, which is not an easy one to spell, but it's ALUISY.com. And we'll do /breaking digital. And I will actually put a few things specific to this conversation as well as a free gift for your listeners on there.
Oh wow, cool. I can't wait for the surprise.
Absolutely.
Will it be smell-o-vision?
It just might be.
Perfect. Good. You're going to be like a billionaire. Yeah, cool. No, thanks, Gabe. And we'll also have all of the links on our page and ways to get in touch with you on thedigitaldelusion.com/podcast, and we'll have some of your links there, and so people can take a look and see what they want to do. So
awesome, Doyle.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Gabe. I really appreciate it. And
it was a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, and we'll see you guys online.
Thank you very much for listening to Breaking Digital, the podcast for smart entrepreneurs wanting to become true digital leaders in their industry and to own online. If you have any comments on the program, please feel free to connect on Twitter @DoyleBuehler with the hashtag #OwnOnline. I would really appreciate it if you could share this podcast with your network, as I'm sure they will get some value from it for building their successful business online as well. You can find the resources that we talked about, as well as the transcript and full podcast for download on thedigitaldelusion.com/podcast or on iTunes or on SoundCloud. I'm Doyle Buehler, and I will see you online.
Thank you for listening to Breaking Digital with Doyle Buehler. While he goes and makes a sandwich, you can find all of the notes, links, and details on this podcast by visiting thedigitaldelusion.com/podcast. Go on and click that now. www.thedigitaldelusion.com/podcast. I'll definitely click that. If you'd like a free copy of the book, The Digital Delusion, How to Overcome the Misguidance and Misinformation Online, just send an email to doyle@thedigitaldelusion.com. See you online.